Howdy, 8th grade. Today we're going to be talking about a thing called inverse variation, which I don't expect you to have heard of before. It should be pretty much new. But before we jump into it, I want to talk about one thing we talked about last semester, which is called direct variation. So direct variation is when we have a formula that looks like y equals k times x, and k can be whatever we want. So direct variation is anytime we have the formula y equals something, and we write that something as a k times x. So an example would be y equals 3x, and what that's going to look like right here is, let me make a quick graph. If we just pick some x values, let's try -1. X of -1 would give me a y of -3. 0 would give me 0, and 1 would give me 3. So I'd have a nice line going, that's an awful line, let me try that again, going right through there. And some things to note is that it is a straight line every time we have direct variation, and it also goes through the origin. And both of these, again, are going to happen every time we have direct variation. It's going to be a straight line going straight through the origin. So now that we kind of reviewed that, I want to talk to you guys about the opposite of direct variation, which is called inverse variation. So inverse variation is when we have, instead of y equals something times x, we have y equals something divided by x. So instead of having y times x, we're going to have y equals something, or k, divided by x, or y equals k over x. And anytime we have anything that looks like this, it's inverse variation. So I think the easiest way to figure out what this looks like is to just make one up and jump right in. So I'm going to use 8 for k, and we're going to say y equals 8 divided by x. And this, because again we have y equals something divided by x, that is going to be an inverse variation. So y equals something divided by x. Let me make a quick graph real quick. We're going to have our x values and our y values. And let's pick out some x's. Let's do -4, -2, -1, 0, 1, 2, and 4, which I know are a lot of points, but this is not a straight line, so the more points we get, the better. And if x is -4, 8 divided by -4 is -2, which will be my y. This will be -4. X is -1, y will be -8. X is 0. I can't divide by 0, so that'll just be a question mark there. This one will give me 8, 4, and 2. Please do check me on this, but I am fairly certain I got those numbers right. And we will jump right into making a graph. So I need to make sure I go from -4 to 4 here. Add a couple extra points just to make sure we're good. And from -8 to 8. So if I put 8 on here, 6, 7, 8, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So let's plot these points at -4. I have -2 right there. At -2 I have -4. And -1 I have -8. And at 1 I have 8, 2 I have 4, and at 4 I have 2. So if I plot more points, if you can see, these are definitely not in a straight line. If I have more points, it'd be a little bit easier to see this, but this graph would look something like this, which is not like anything we've seen before, and it's kind of funky. But that is perfectly okay. If it looks like this, we're doing well. If we have a negative, it'll be flipped, but otherwise most inverse variation graphs will look kind of like these two shapes pointing outwards, where we have the one up top and the one on bottom, and every time we have inverse variation, it'll look fairly similar. We'll be good to go. So anytime you see y equals something divided by x, then that is an inverse variation. An interesting property of that is that we have this thing called the product rule. And I know we've had several product rules, but anytime you get a rule by multiplying things, we call it a product rule in math, because we are very, very unoriginal. And the product rule is, if we have inverse variation, I'm going to write if inverse variation. If that's something that's going on, and it has the points, and I need two different points. So my first point is going to be x1, y1, and my second point is going to be x2, y2. And if both of these points are in an inverse variation, then I know that x1 times y1 is going to equal x2 times y2. And that's going to happen every single time. And I want to look at y. So if I have here my y equals k divided by x, then looking at it, if I multiply both sides by k, one sec. If I multiply both sides by x here, I have yx equals k. So no matter what y and x I have, I will always end up with the same k. So other than that, basically what these questions are going to look like here at the back with the lesson practice is to be able to say if something is direct or inverse variation. Quick thing to look for, if it is y equals k times x, that's direct. And if it's y equals k divided by x, that'll be inverse variation. And it also asks you to graph one, and we should be good to go there. Otherwise, just use the formulas, plug in what you need. There's 5 questions. I believe y'all can do that pretty well. I will see you tomorrow.